Okay, hold on. You have to let me sit down before we get started here.
Oh, are you back again?
I'm back. Are you back? Are you all here today?
Yes.
I always say that, you're goofy, but you're really super smart. So it's a really great combination.
No.
Yeah. You're all like, yeah, thanks. Thanks, daughter. You're welcome.
Okay.
Okay.
Are you ready to go?
It's rolling.
Oh, it's rolling.
It's
Okay.
rolling. We're going to just keep moving along here with another video. Back again with some Boss Radio stories. As we're sometimes, it's been a long time since you've really had to think about Boss Radio. A lot of life has gone on since those early heydays. So we were just kind of doing some research just to refresh your memory. That's all. And one of the statistics that I found really interesting, I've never really thought about this, is that the music of Boss Radio was the music of the baby boomers. And the statistics show that 80 million baby boomers basically got their music from Boss Radio days.
On Saturdays and Sundays at the beach during the summers of those years of 1965 on, you could listen to a great big, at least like a broadcasting.
Yeah, you could just be walking down the beach and
hear Boss Radio come in, a little transistor radio.
Radios everywhere.
It's every place.
Yeah, we're not denying that society has changed, technology has changed, communities have changed, and people have changed. So these stories are really just kind of for the family.
But
But they're your stories, and that's what we love about them.
It's memories of that particular era.
Memories of that era, and we're gonna we'll move on as we go on these videos. We'll talk more about how we became builders and owners of radio stations, and then some of our own stories of basically I kind of grew up in it. We went on the air when I was 16, but.
And I was 17.
Imagine that. Wow.
Somebody from our sales department did some studies on the 1965 billing for KHJ radio, AM. And remember, FM had not come into existence yet. AM radio in Los Angeles, the billing for KHJ was $100 million a year. No wonder they could pay the salaries for engineers, disc jockeys, give away a car every day, 7 of them a week, when the cars were only a couple $1,000 or something like that. There's no wonder we had contests running every week. On Saturday it would wrap up, Monday morning, new promos with a new contest. Last train in Clarksville, over with, Batman, over with.
Okay, but some of the fun things are the behind the scenes shenanigans that would go on with some of these contests. Okay, now I have a memory, and you're going to have to guide me through this because we haven't rehearsed this. I have a memory of some sort of contest where either the disc jockey or the promotions person or whatever rigged it so that their girlfriend would win. Remember, It was like a $10,000 prize or something. Do you remember this?
It was, yes, and it was rigged, and a drug problem occurred.
There was a drug bust. There was a drug bust somewhere.
And a drug bust, and the cops went searching on this guy, and they pulled out a wallet and his keys and his pencil, and he pulled out a check.
In his front pocket was a check from KHJ for $10,000. And do you remember how that all came about? I mean, was it his girlfriend worked at the station, or somebody?
It was a girl,
or the girl won, and she gave him the money for
pay off of the
but
debt.
Somehow KHJ got caught up in this drug bust because somebody rigged the contest.
Yes.
And it's like, can you imagine that getting out in the news today? What would happen to that radio station for being part of that, even though it wasn't really their fault? But there was a lot of different sources going on.
One of the other things, the Real Don Steele was going to go from one location to another location, like on a remote, and then check in with us when he got there. Well, people would follow him in the car, and they got going too fast, and there was a traffic accident. And in the traffic accident, years later, it was settled for several $1 million. Somebody died in the traffic accident.
Oh, really?
Yes. And so therefore, the station has to be warned if they're going to do promotions.
Yeah.
Hey, check with your insurance, check with your lawyer, and FCC rules. because he couldn't.
Well,
couldn't go to bars.
because honestly, before Boss Radio, big contests like this didn't exist.
Only when you were doing 100 million a year can you afford it.
So they kind of had to write the playbook on contest laws and rules and what not to do, etc. Because that before that, radio wasn't really all that exciting, right? I mean, as far as that's concerned, as far as contests and stuff go.
We made it exciting.
Yeah, well, yeah, we just talked about some criminal activity and tragedies. Sorry. But we were in some of our research, we were just doing something. It's like the guy that was the writer of
Woody.
the history of rock and roll. Woody, what's his last name?
I can't remember that right now, and he's going to hit me for it. But yeah, with Woody, and there was another girl. They were writers. We produced this 48 hours, 40 hours, 48.
I don't know. I thought it was like 48 or 49. We were talking about
hours of rock and roll history, of interviewing the people from the early ages all the way up to Beatles, Rolling Stones, Sonny and Cher, anybody who wrote a song.
Well, so Woody has his own website where he does kind of the history of KHJ, and we're going to include that in the link in the comments area in the description of this video, so that we can give Woody credit where credit is due, because he has some really great information on that. So if you're a true pure Boss Radio fan, we're going to make it easy for you to find some more information. The stories that we have with you are more a lot of behind the scenes stuff as an engineer who was on duty when Boss Radio broke. But you were talking about, how Woody was the writer of the history of rock and roll program, which was they call it the crown jewel of stuff that RKO did.
It was recorded, narrated by Bill Drake, later narrated by Humble Harv, one of the disc jockeys, later narrated by Robert W. Morgan. It was done by several people, and then it was syndicated across the country, USA, and major cities, and it's probably still heard today. Some people have pirate copies on cassette.
Yeah. Well, what year was this?
This was 1967, 68.
Not much history. I mean, it's like starting with what year? Like 55?
I know it probably went back into the 50s when they started writing some of the songs, some of the rock and roll songs, maybe Chuck Berry and things like that.
Chuck Berry, Elvis,
yes.
Maybe like a Jan and Dean or.
And I remember I was on duty at the studio the day Elvis died, and we had phone calls from our sister station that RKO had in Memphis, Tennessee, told us that Elvis had died. And I remember recording this stuff and getting it on to the news department that we put on the air.
And that was what, 1977?
When did Elvis die? I can't remember.
I think it was 1977.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a memory of learning that Elvis died living in Northridge. So I would think that was 1977-ish that he died.
It could very well be. I was there when Kennedy was assassinated in '63. All of these
big stories.
That time, because this is before television.
Somewhat.
Before FM.
Right.
And television was there, but this was this was a radio.
But radio was immediate. I mean, that was the beautiful thing about radio, is that there was no time from you got a phone call, you can go on the air, as opposed to where at the time in television you kind of had to wait for a news anchor to show up at the station if you had an emergency, if they weren't there. So it wasn't as immediate, and the remote trucks would take a lot of time to get out anywhere. But radio, boom, you could be on.
Yes.
That's what was the wonderful thing about radio. It was like it was the very first social media outlet in reality. Yeah. So, any more stories that you want to share for this particular video? Do you have anything else today?
No, we can tease the next.
We can tease the next one?
Yeah.
Okay, what do you want to tease now? Okay.
Can we do the Tiny Tim story?
Oh, God. You and the tell the Tiny Tim story for our millions of fans.
One of the promotions was a day in the life of Tiny Tim. Now, Tiny Tim was a singing artist in the 60s. Also had a hit, Tiptoe Through the Tulips.
And he sang falsetto.
Right.
So it was like, I can't even do it. Tiptoe through the tulips. It was crazy stuff.
And so we did a day in the life of Tiny Tim, and Tiny Tim wanted to go to Palm Springs. Now, why would you? And we found out. So I, as the engineer, the promotions guy, Tiny Tim and we all got in a car and we went to Palm Springs. Now, this was also in the days of when equipment was not the size of your cell phone.
Right.
It was huge.
The size of a Samsonite
We had to
suitcase
put everything in
and
the
stuff.
trunk and so forth. So it's a 2-hour ride from Los Angeles to Palm Springs. Tiny Tim sang to us in the car with his ukulele that he brought out of a trash bag, and he started singing in the back seat. I can remember it to this day, over 50 years ago. And he sang us different songs all the way to Palm Springs. 2 hours in the car.
Did he sing falsetto the whole
In
time?
falsetto all the way to Palm Springs. We went to visit a man named Nick Lucas. Nick Lucas. Who was Nick Lucas? Well, Tiny Tim wanted to meet Nick because Nick Lucas had a hit in the 1920s called Tiptoe Through the Tulips. So we get to Nick Lucas' house and we go inside, get all the greens over with. And I have to get all this stuff out of the trunk, load it up in the living room, hook it all up and record it, and visit with Tiny Tim and Nick Lucas. And they sang Tiptoe Through the Tulips together. Now, this is 50 years ago. Nick is dead. Tiny Tim is dead. It was just a phenomenal, what do we call it? To have them sing this like, free.
Yeah.
This is not going to.
In your radio career in Los Angeles, you had a multitude of brushes with celebrities.
Yes.
A multitude. It's too bad selfies weren't a big deal then.
Yes.
Because you'd have an entire wall of all of these people that would come in and out of that radio station to do something. It was glamorous then. It was fun then. It was different than it is today.
Tiny Tim later married somebody. The person was Miss Vicky. Miss Vicky was on Johnny Carson's show, and they were married in 1967 in front of 25 million people watching television.
Really? Oh, they got married on Johnny Carson's show?
On Johnny Carson's show. And
so Tiny Tim was a bit bigger of a celebrity than I give him credit for.
Yes.
So I keep saying he was like, who cares about Tiny Tim? But clearly he was a big icon.
we did concerts with Tiny Tim in Santa Monica. We did concerts wherever we went to. We had, that was the promotion of the week. So anyway, but you're right. There's different stars that came in, and we could go on and on. Listen.
Well, you talk a lot about Sonny and Cher. Ringo Starr, obviously Tiny Tim. Who else was, some of your favorites?
When Ringo Starr and the Beatles came in, you look at
You're looking for something to get a souvenir.
souvenir.
Yeah.
And we were remodeling one of the studios, so I grabbed a tile off the roof of the ceiling and had Ringo Starr write his name on the tile.
I remember that.
We still have it. I think.
You still have it. Yeah, Ringo Starr's signature on a tile roof or a ceiling tile.
We should sell that on eBay. We probably can, retire.
Yeah, but who would believe it's really Ringo Starr's signature?
Oh, that's.
I mean, I guess you could do a DNA test or whatever, a carbon testing to find out how old that ceiling tile is.
Or how old the tile was.
Right, exactly, how old the tile was. That would be fun. Maybe we should. We need to raise some money. We're going to sell the Ringo Starr signature on the ceiling
And
tile.
so we use this taping right now to sell Tiny Tim.
Yeah. It's like,
Ringo Starr.
So now, have you got it out of your system?
Yes.
The Tiny Tim. You said it like I just scolded you. Did you get it out of your system? Yes, I did. All right.
Now can we do lunch?
All right, we're gonna do lunch now. So,
right.
thank you for watching. If you don't want to miss an episode or whatever it is that we're doing here, subscribe to this YouTube channel, and we are going to put a link in the comments regarding Woody, the writer of the history of rock and roll.